Last month on November the 19th, David Lee made it public that he was going to retire from the NBA for good. He was a very solid player, and he was a two-time NBA All-Star, and he won a championship back in 2015 with the Golden State Warriors. But if you really look into it, he retired really early. He only played for 12 seasons. I mean, just let that sink in. David Lee is out of the league. In this video, I'll be talking about the downfall of David Lee and what caused his early retirement. Once again, it's 3rd IV 195 coming at you with my intellect. Stay tuned. Here's David Lee's best season when he was on the New York Knicks. David Lee was drafted in the first round at number 30 by the New York Knicks. He never really got off to a good start. He only averaged 5.1 points per game and 4.5 rebounds per game during his rookie season. He was also the starting power forward for 13 games in a row. Throughout this starting stretch, as you can see, he wasn't playing that good, but there was one particular game where he showed that he can and would be a solid player in the league, and that was against the Phoenix Suns back on January the 2nd in 2006. He scored 23 points, had 3 steals, 2 assists, and 15 rebounds, and for the game, he shot 90% from the field on 10 for 11 shooting, and he played 52 minutes in the game. The game went into triple overtime, and the New York Knicks beat the Phoenix Suns 140 to 133. This was the second double-double that David Lee recorded in his career at the time, but unfortunately, he never got to start consecutively again for the rest of the season. David Lee improved a lot in his sophomore season. He averaged his first double-double in his career. He averaged 10.7 points per game, 10.4 rebounds per game, shooting 60% from the field, playing 29.8 minutes per game in 58 games. On November the 28th, he started for the first time during this season because Channing Frye suffered an injury. He scored 14 points and grabbed 11 rebounds, but the New York Knicks went on to lose the game to the Chicago Bulls 102 to 85. This was the 7th double-double that he recorded in the month of November during that time. During that season, David Lee led the New York Knicks in rebounding and scoring, but Channing Frye was in the way of him, playing more minutes. He was leading Channing Frye in literally almost every statistical category. The reason why Channing Frye was interfering with David Lee's minutes at the time was because he plays the same position that David Lee plays, power forward and center, and Isaiah Thomas, who was a Knicks coach at the time, said that Channing Frye is a superior perimeter shooter, and his perimeter shooting would make it harder for teams to double-team Knicks' leading scorer at the time, Eddie Curry. And yes, Eddie Curry was the leading scorer for the Knicks for that season. He averaged 19.5 points per game. David Lee led the league in field goal percentage going into the All-Star break that season, shooting 61.5% from the field. He also participated in the NBA Rising Stars sophomore versus rookie game, and the sophomores went on to win the game 155 to 114. David Lee won the MVP award for this event. He scored 34 points and was a perfect 14 for 14 shooting from the field and grabbed 11 rebounds. But unfortunately, later on in the season, David Lee landed awkwardly on Andrew Bogut's foot while the Knicks were going up against the Milwaukee Bucks on February the 23rd back in 2007. He was out for a couple of weeks, and when he returned, he only played a few minutes per game. He was on minutes restriction, and he was only able to play 58 games during that season. David Lee continued to play good for the rest of his career in New York until he became a bona fide starter. And on Saturday, November the 29th, against the Golden State Warriors, David Lee had a monster game. He scored a career-high 37 points and grabbed 21 rebounds and had 3 steals, 1 block, and 2 assists. This was the first time at the time that a Knicks player had 30 points and 20 rebounds in a game since Patrick Ewing did it back on February the 23rd in 1977, where he scored 34 points and grabbed 25 rebounds. On December the 9th, back in 2008, he scored 11 points and grabbed 15 rebounds. He also became the 11th Knicks player in franchise history to have 10 consecutive double-double games. On February the 11th, David Lee replaced Allen Iverson to be on the East team for the 2010 NBA All-Star Game. This was the first time that a New York Knicks player, at the time, participated in an All-Star game, since Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell participated in 2001. A couple of weeks after, on April the 2nd, Lee got his first triple-double in his career. He scored 37 points, grabbed 20 rebounds, and dished out 10 assists. Lee was the first player since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1976 to get 35-plus points in a game while grabbing 20 rebounds and dishing out 10 assists at the same time. David Lee scoring 37 points was a career high for him as well. David Lee became an unrestricted free agent after this season. During the 2010 offseason, on July the 9th, Lee got signed by the New York Knicks and traded to the Golden State Warriors. In exchange, New York got Anthony Randolph, Kalina Azubuike, Ronnie Turiaf, and a future second-round pick that would get traded to the Knicks. Here's David Lee's best season with the Golden State Warriors. Lee played solid during his time with the Warriors. During the 2012 to 2013 season, David Lee was selected to be in his second All-Star appearance in his career as a reserve. He was the first Warrior to participate in the All-Star game since Latrell Sprewell back in 1997. David Lee also led the league in double-doubles this season with 56. During this season, he averaged 18.5 points per game, 11.2 rebounds per game, and 3.5 assists per game. The Warriors made it to the playoffs in 2013, and this was the first time that David Lee played in the playoffs in his career. But unfortunately, in Game 1, after losing to the Denver Nuggets, 97-95, he tore his right hip flexor. He scored 10 points and grabbed 14 rebounds in the game. Lee was ruled out for the rest of the playoffs, but he returned in the 6th and final game versus the Denver Nuggets, but he only played for 1 minute. Golden State went on to win the series 4-2. The Warriors ended up facing the San Antonio Spurs in the second round, but they lost in 6 games, 4-2. David Lee played from Game 3 to 6. Even though he was still injured, the Golden State Warriors were able to make it to the playoffs again the next year in 2014, but they lost to the LA Clippers in 7 games in the first round. During this series, David Lee averaged 13.9 points per game, 2.6 assists per game, and 9.1 rebounds per game. This was Lee's second playoff appearance in his career. This is where things started to go downhill for David Lee. He strained his left hamstring in a preseason game, and he never played for 24 games out of the first 25 games for the 2014 to 2015 NBA season. Lee lost his starting spot to Draymond Green for the rest of the season. Lee became a reserve for the first time in his career since his early years in New York. Golden State made it to the playoffs again in 2015, and they went on to win the NBA championship. They beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in 6 games, 4-2. This was David Lee's third playoff appearance in his career, and his first NBA ring. Throughout the 2015 NBA playoffs, David Lee averaged 3.1 points per game and 2.6 rebounds per game in 13 games, just playing 8 minutes per game. During the 2015 NBA offseason, on July the 25th, David Lee was traded to the Boston Celtics for Gerald Green and Chris Babb because they wanted to get rid of his salary. He was of no use to the Golden State Warriors anymore. Things never worked out for Lee when he was on the Boston Celtics. He just didn't fit the system for the time that he was there. He only averaged 7.1 points per game, 1.8 assists per game, and 4.3 rebounds per game in 30 games until he was waived on February the 19th, last year 2 seasons ago. 3 days later, on February the 22nd, David Lee signed to the Dallas Mavericks. In 25 games for the Mavericks, he averaged 8.5 points per game, 1.2 assists per game, and 7 rebounds per game. At this point, he wasn't what he was like he was in his prime. Then during the offseason, on August the 2nd, last year in 2016, he signed with the San Antonio Spurs, but his role was lesser, obviously because he was on a championship contending team. In 79 games with the Spurs last season, he averaged 7.3 points per game, 1.6 assists per game, and 5.6 rebounds per game. During the offseason this year, he declined his player option and became a free agent until he announced his retirement last month. So we've seen the decline of David Lee, but that's not why he retired. So the question is, why did he retire? David Lee retired because of the Golden State Warriors. That's why he retired. David Lee said, "The Warriors have caused a lot of teams in the league to say either we are gonna try to put as many guys on one team as possible to try to compete with the Warriors, or we are gonna go super young, so it limited my options." He also said, I either wanted to be in a situation where I was on a team that could be a contender, which once again, as you know, limits it to maybe 6 teams if we are being generous, or a team where I could play significant enough minutes to really be worth coming back and to feel like I was doing something meaningful. And while I had a couple opportunities, that criteria wasn't really filled. When the offers didn't come in the way that I wanted them to, although I could go be someone's 4th big man on a team that's gonna win 30 games, I decided to roll the dice and to try something new, and I'm really excited about my decision. But that's it for the video, guys. It's sad to see such a star player fall off so fast and retire so early. And like I always say, please like and subscribe and hit that notification button and comment below. Tell me what you think. Peace!
So nickel on my pickle, they'll laugh if I tickle them with it. Benefits of having talent in you. These days I catch more bodies than Captain Ginyu. I'm a future warrior on my way to Goku, yeah.